So this panel is called Multichain Revolution, and we're really grateful to have some of the sort of top minds who sit from very interesting perspectives on this topic. Maybe we could just start off with intros, maybe just one-on-one. Maybe if you could just give a quick intro of your projects and what you guys do and how it relates to the multi-chain.
Yeah, my name is Zaki Manian, co-founder of Sommelier Finance. We actually we're a system by which you can have actively managed DeFi strategies. So we have a product called Real Yield ETH. Real Yield ETH is the highest ETH yielding vault on Ethereum. It generates yield from doing things like leverage staking of ETH, and also providing liquidity on DEXs for ETH liquid staking tokens. It's market made over $1 billion of transactions in ETH liquid staking tokens. It's a really strong demonstration of sort of the power of our technology, which is sort of combining a Cosmos chain, which does security and governance for these sophisticated DeFi challenges with execution on EVM chains. And we are integrated with Axelar, and we use Axelar's messaging technology to actually deliver messages from the Cosmos chain to these smart contracts across the EVMs.
Hey everyone, great to be here. I'm Georgios Vlachos, co-founder of Axelar Network. Axelar is a cross-chain messaging protocol that allows developers to build cross-chain applications. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with bridges, and Axelar itself is not a bridge. It is the underlying technology that allows developers to build bridges, but also many other types of applications like Sommelier, Zaki's company, but we also have a lot of applications built in on Archway, leverage our technology.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike from Archway. Archway is a new layer 1 protocol. It's designed all around value capture for developers. And so the broad idea is that developers are creating a ton of value for underlying L1s. If you think about a network like Ethereum, you build a successful application on Ethereum, you're bringing users, assets, transactions to the chain. That creates a ton of value for the underlying asset, but you as a developer don't capture any of that. And so with Archway, we've built a unique economic model that redirects revenues straight to developers. And so you build an app on Archway, it starts getting usage. You as a developer get a proportional share of protocol revenues for all of the interactions on your contracts. We are a Cosmos-based chain, and so we've got interoperability in our DNA. We also partner with and integrate Axelar to extend beyond Cosmos, and happy to be here and sort of give the perspective of the L1 side of things.
Awesome. And on my side, I'll be moderating this panel. My name is Ryan. I sit on the Coinbase Ventures team, strategic investment arm of Coinbase, the largest US platform. So maybe we could start off by sort of defining multi-chain, and this is kind of the sort of why should we care kind of portion of the panel. But all of you represent companies at the forefront of the multi-chain shift, and the first question is kind of why should we care about multi-chain, and specifically why now, right? Because I think our industry always talks about these topics, but it always takes a while for them to kind of form and develop and ultimately get product market fit. And it feels like the conversation around multi-chain, especially now, is quite relevant. So we'd love to kind of maybe just get a sense of, what's different this time? Why is multi-chain more relevant? I feel like maybe the Axelar folks would probably have, and not to put you on the spot, but would have probably the best view here. And then I would love to hear from maybe the Archway and Sommelier teams as well.
Yeah, great question. So multi-chain is the belief that there's going to be hundreds of chains that all are going to have significant economic activity on top of them. And at this point, I think it's indisputable, given how many people, how many important companies in the space are building cross-chain and are incentivized to launch their own layer 1s, I think it's indisputable that the world is going to converge to such a future. I think the other important reason why we need many blockchains is that a single state machine, a single blockchain today, is not going to be able to do more than something like 10 million transactions per day. And if we want to become foundational architecture for Web 2, we need to scale this by an order of magnitude. And this is really, really hard. So really the answer is to scale horizontally and create many, many different blockchains, right? So to me, that's the inevitable future. And once we accept this as an assumption, the question is, how does this relate to developers, but also the end users, right? If you're a developer, how do you navigate this multi-chain paradigm? Do you build on one blockchain? Do you deploy on many different blockchains? And it's a very complicated decision, and there's a lot of confusion in the space. So with Axelar, what we recommend to developers typically is pick one blockchain, the best blockchain for your use case, and through messaging, allow users from any other blockchain to access your application, and you will be able to do this with seamless user experience from any wallet directly with one click, right? Use any asset on any application on any chain. So really, like, the cross-chain movement is about how do we enable seamless user experience in a world that's fragmented and there's many different blockchains.
So I guess one of the powers of having multiple blockchains is the ability to like sort of deeply customize a blockchain for your use case, the so-called app chain thesis. We've seen that app chain thesis sort of play out with Sommelier and the sort of strengths and weaknesses of building in a multi-chain environment. Ethereum L1, the EVM environments generally have the richest DeFi experience, the most transaction sort of value transacted, and the biggest opportunities for strategists on top of Sommelier to build differentiated strategies that generate high yields. And we've seen that across the sort of successful strategies on Sommelier. But what was key to making Sommelier possible was having a customized blockchain that could implement the sort of regulatory, self-regulatory, and governance aspects, so that we weren't actually putting user funds directly under the control of the strategist. That the strategists aren't just a glorified multisig. That there actually is a protocol here that is validating trades and decisions that are coming by the strategy that can step in if a strategist disappears or something goes wrong. This sort of multi-layered security architecture is why we've been successfully growing TVL in Sommelier past $30 million. And there's just ever more ETH sort of under management of the protocol, yet we're able to safely do all of these sort of sophisticated strategies in a decentralized setting. We also are seeing like increased demand for like for the tokens that come out of the strategy, like the real yield ETH token, to be used in DeFi protocols on sort of other layers. So we have both Cosmos chains and ETH L2s that want to use real yield ETH as a representation of the best, sort of the highest possible ETH denominated yield in their DeFi protocols, build things like perps and lending protocols on top of it. So this sort of like layered composability increasingly is going to be the pattern, I think, of the strongest apps in blockchain, and the reason why I've been working sort of in interoperability for all of these years.
Yeah, I think these guys hit on it well. I think about scalability as Georgios said, horizontally scaling across multiple chains. As Zaki said, sovereignty and the ability to configure a chain across the stack to meet your community's needs and preferences. Not everyone wants to exist and operate within a singular monolithic system. People want to tweak things across consensus, security, economics, governance. And then I think the other big thing for us is allowing builders and developers to expand their addressable market, just to tap into new chains, which bring new communities, new users, new assets, more liquidity. You can't exist in an island. There's very real benefits to social and economic integration, and the way we think about things around just creating sustainable economics for the developers that are building on the platform, multi-chain is a key component to that.
All right, so to summarize, sounds like a little bit mix of the ability to have flexibility on the project side, both on a business and technical perspective, as well as the ability, for scaling and the horizontal thesis that a lot of people here have chatted about sort of previously this panel as well. I think on Coinbase's side of it as well, I think we definitely took this view of the multi-chain approach kind of when we were thinking about incubating Base, which is a new EVM compatible L2 that we recently launched. So I think this is definitely sort of top of mind, especially as we're seeing just chains across different frameworks, whether that's in Cosmos or EVM. I think it's good to start at the high level there. maybe it would be good to zoom in a little bit on specific testimonials or examples or benefits that multi-chain specifically provides to you guys. So, yeah, I think we have really good perspectives across the three speakers, but maybe it would just be great to hear if you could maybe each share like a use case or story where the multi-chain approach made like, an actual impact for you guys managing or building the application, or whether on the user side. And Zaki, I think you kind of tapped on this in the answer to the first question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that has been the case is that, when we first started building Sommelier, we actually had to like sort of build our own vertically integrated bridge into the protocol. And that was a huge barrier to entry for any builder who wanted to build. And if, I believe that like the sort of Sommelier design pattern is going to be a more common design pattern that other app builders will follow. That like having, like Rune from Maker is sort of talking about a very similar architecture right now for like the future, for sort of the Maker endgame, which is like you have governance sitting on one chain, you have assets custodied on any number of chains, and that becomes like sort of the sort of, that could become a foundational architecture. But having infrastructure providers like Axelar come along and provide a common base layer so that you don't have to deal with like building your own sort of individual like vertically integrated bridge will decrease time to market. So where multi-chain applications could have taken years to build, in the past, it now becomes possible in a matter of months to spin up a sort of multi-chain system on top of Axelar. And another team that builds on top of Axelar that I've worked very closely with is Squid, which builds a sort of multi-chain exchange protocol where you're able to sort of seamlessly swap. So there's no like bridge then swap. You're just like, I have ETH on ETH L1, I want USDC on base, I can get there, and it's one click, one signature experience. That kind of user experience, again, you need like this sort of secure base infrastructure, and not having to build that yourself is a huge enabler.
Yeah, so one comes to mind, an application called Astrovault on top of Archway. It's an AMM. They have a pretty unique model where they use liquid staking derivatives as base pairs within their DEX. And what they do when you provide liquidity, they mint the derivative, and then they transfer that underlying token to its native chain. They stake it with their validator, and then they tap into that staking yield and send it back to their application on Archway and use that as protocol earned liquidity. And so if you were going to provide liquidity in Atom, let's say, you mint the Atom derivative, they send the Atom to the Cosmos hub, stake it with their validator, and send the staking yield back to Archway, which is really interesting because they're able to put their liquidity to work. They're able to draw income from the assets that they host. And really, it's interesting because they've built a real sustainable business model because they're tapping into the staking yield from all the connected L1s and assets that they support. They've got trading fees on the DEX, and then they're tapping into the contract interactions on Archway and the protocol level rewards. And boom, all of a sudden you've got a real actual business model, which isn't entirely common in the space, especially for DEXs. And so that's a unique one, and it is uniquely made possible by being multi-chain and tapping into all of those connected L1s for staking yield.
Great question. And yeah, obviously, like I'm personally a big fan of Sommelier, like Squid, that also Zaki mentioned. They've been around for a while and very successful in the cross-chain ecosystem. Astrovault is another partner, so I think we covered many of the interesting applications. And I think this is a great question, by the way. It's something I get a lot. Like a lot of people ask me, what is the killer application for cross-chain? And just to give the contrarian view here, to me, like cross-chain is not really about any novel applications, right? If you look at the use cases, any single use case you could build on a single state machine, on Ethereum, right? On Ethereum mainnet. It may not scale as well, but you can still do it. And when you go cross-chain, it's more about how do you enable those same applications to thrive and offer the same user experience while having users in many fragmented ecosystems, right? So to me, cross-chain is about how do we make it so that any user on any ecosystem can access any application on any other ecosystem, but at the end of the day, the applications that are exciting on a single blockchain are still going to be the most exciting ones when it comes to cross-chain.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think from the Coinbase perspective, integrating new chains and contracts is very tedious because we have a very, high bar on the security side for, adding a lot of these things. And we have to always balance the cost of integrating this as well as making sure that the UX for the user doesn't really change in a crazy way. I think to your point, the concept of sort of extending that application, right? I think for a lot of application teams, they likely don't want to deal with a lot of the hard blockchain, sort of lower level things. And so I think in some ways, utilizing bridge technology or general message passing technology can certainly kind of make that easier in terms of them being able to traverse sort of these new L1s and L2s as they come live. So I think up until now, we've kind of covered, the use case and benefits and why we should care. Would maybe switch it back to sort of the cost of integrating the multi-chain into your guys' applications, because I think that's something that is not quite as well appreciated, obviously, from the developer's perspective. So yeah, it would be good to understand what it takes to add multi-chain capabilities today and any related challenges that y'all have run into with that. And obviously with Axelar, you guys are on the other side of it to kind of make that easier for the developer, but we'd love to maybe hear your guys' perspective on this.
So until now, all of Sommelier's vaults have always been designed so that all the assets are not bridged and all the assets stay on one chain. So if we have a vault on ETH L1, the assets stay on ETH L1. Users enter and exit the vault on ETH L1. Same thing on an L2 or an alt EVM. We have been working on a design for multi-chain vaults where vaults can actually move, where the vault can assets can move across multiple chains, be allocated there. One of I think the biggest challenges for developers is that moving to multi-chain will change many of the sort of fundamental assumptions and design patterns of your apps. The idea of being able to sort of let's say a user is adding liquidity to your application, if the user, figuring out what the total amount of liquidity in your app and the price of everything can all be done atomically if you're on one chain. If you are trying to price, adding stable coins to a vault across multiple chains, now you have sort of asynchrony. Now you have to deal with the fact that you have assets across multiple chains. You can't instantaneously price all of the assets across all of those chains. So the user experience, you have to account for this in your system design. And there are various approaches that might be suitable for various kinds of products and various kinds of DeFi products. But very much the fundamental nature of your app, it's not simply just a matter of I can just add in multi-chain. The sort of core economic logic of your application is frequently affected by designing for a multi-chain environment.
Yeah, completely agree with Zaki here. I think cross-chain is just a new implementation paradigm, and you lose synchronicity, right? So maybe you want to do a cross-chain swap, you commit to a rate on the origin chain. When the message ends up on the destination chain, the price has changed, right? So you cannot fulfill the swap anymore. And at that point, you have to deal with a bunch of edge cases. So that's a lot of work that the application developers need to do to figure out around the specifics of their application. That said, I think to get started with cross-chain, it's not that hard, and maybe Zaki can confirm, but if you want to send a message right now from an EVM to EVM chain, you're a Solidity developer, you can go pretty easily on our website, read the documentation, probably get started and send your first message with 10 minutes, right? But it is really this new implementation paradigm where you lose synchronicity that's really hard for developers, and you have to account with all these complexities that come down from that.
Yeah, great points. Within Cosmos, the beauty of IBC is you're getting interoperability within Cosmos out of the box. For us, we're a CosmWasm-based chain. That's the VM and smart contract framework of Cosmos that is really tightly integrated within the Cosmos stack and IBC enabled by default. And so, to Georgios' point, it simplifies quite a bit within Cosmos, but then IBC only goes so far. I would say that's the primary constraint and limitation for dApp developers and folks that are building on our platform today is native compatibility with Cosmos chains, but then hitting a wall thereafter. And native IBC is, it's being implemented across other chains, but it's going to take some time. But yeah, we base everything on Cosmos.
Yeah, it's interesting answers. I think generally the costs or even integrating the concept of cross-chain will likely go down over time, just as you see more developer attention and traction. You know, I think on the Coinbase side of things, the big announcement, at least from the Circle side, was USDC being able to be natively minted now in a lot of new chains, which was not possible before. But I think it took a long time for that to happen, right? And so, you know, I think that's maybe just the first story or example of how a lot of these things will probably go down over time in terms of cost and abstraction. I
mean, and USDC is becoming like a flagship example of like a natively multi-chain asset with CCTB CCTB, which is Circle's bridge, sort of incorporated natively into every almost every USDC deployment, and I expect every USDC deployment means that like you have an asset and it's a flagship asset, but like the asset sort of almost natively incorporates bridging directly into the asset. I think that also is a pattern that I think other asset issuers will follow.
Exactly, and yeah, I think stablecoins. Yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of technology standards which are now, I feel like, borrowing a lot of the concepts that have become popular within the ecosystem. And so hopefully as, you know, native issuance of USDC into chains becomes a lot more prevalent, as we think about putting maybe even real world assets or other stablecoin pairs that are non-USD, will hopefully also follow as well. So maybe kind of moving on, wanted to actually focus the last section of the talk around just multi-chain frameworks in general. You know, so today we have many frameworks around app chains. Just to name a few, a lot of you are built on Cosmos SDK and sort of related technologies and IBC bridging as well. You know, at the same time, on the Ethereum side, there's been a lot of interest specifically on Optimism's OP stack as well, kind of enabling that for the Ethereum communities, you know, of which Coinbase's new L2 is built on as well. I'd just be curious to hear kind of two things. I guess one, how each of you views the landscape of frameworks in general today. And then secondly, I guess the adoption curve for these frameworks over time. It's meant to be pretty high level, so yeah, feel free to answer how you guys see it.
So yeah, I would agree around the convergence of architectures, and it seems like there's a fair bit of momentum behind Cosmos and the OP stack at this point. On the Cosmos front, it's pretty well adopted and battle tested at this point, and I think as far as native interoperability, it's tough to top IBC. When it comes to the OP stack, the launch partners that they came with were pretty extraordinary in Coinbase and Zora and a few others, and they brought instant legitimacy, and you know, there'll be a massive scale of users that follow. The network effects around Ethereum, I think they can sort of ride in that wake. The developer community, the liquidity, even things like wallets will go a long way. I think where they really diverge is Cosmos remains based around sovereignty, whereas the OP stack is kind of following this unifying force of Ethereum, and the community is able to rally around that. That's something Cosmos was never really able to figure out, this singular correlated incentive, whereas the OP ecosystem is able to just inherit that from Ethereum. And that probably, to your second point in question around the adoption curve, I would assume that you know, OP came out of the gate pretty hot with Base, and I assume that momentum will continue at a good clip given the network effects around the broader Ethereum ecosystem. For Cosmos, it's been a steady march over the years. But as you guys have pointed out, there's quite a bit of momentum around native USDC coming to the ecosystem. DYDX will soon launch a couple days ago. the company behind PUBG announced their Cosmo-based chain. So I think they both have different pockets within the space, and they can coexist with Cosmos focused on sovereignty and OP kind of orienting itself towards more Ethereum alignment.
Yeah, I think it's worth also delineating a little bit here between native Web3 companies and then like some of the more traditional enterprises like financial institutions. From my experience, at least today, I would say Cosmos is definitely dominating on the enterprise side, right? Most of the financial institutions we talk to are building on Cosmos. A few are building their own EVM chains, and then many are building on different frameworks, right? Like between Avalanche, Polygon, some of the newer ones like ZK Sync. And I feel like all those different ecosystems, they have very strong go-to-market teams. So I'm more of a believer that there's going to be like 5 or 6 different frameworks and maybe some one-off ones like Solana. But yeah, overall, it seems like everyone is doing good work. So it's more about the go-to-market here, right? And I feel like a lot of the different frameworks will be used. And then in DeFi, native Web3 stuff, yeah, totally agree that Optimism has done an incredible job. Cosmos obviously has been around for a while. But yeah, still, I feel like everyone is doing good work. And I do personally expect that there's going to be like 6 or 7 ecosystems that are going to be quite strong for years to come.
So my sort of competitive analysis of the ecosystem is incredible momentum behind the OP stack. And I think the big trade-off is, and I think DYDX's adoption of the Cosmos SDK is a sort of perfect example. And like, will hopefully be the like core, will be like a really good example of like what can be built on the Cosmos SDK. So OP stack, very good for building something that's almost like Ethereum, and then like has small incremental changes from Ethereum, benefits enormously from Ethereum network effects around wallets, explorers, etc. Cosmos SDK, incredibly powerful and able to do things where, you know, block production is incredibly finely controlled by the application. You can implement sort of novel MEV mitigations. You can experiment with like completely different ways accounts work. You can sort of natively build in margin and leverage into like the account layer of the system. You can natively build in like order matching into the block production system. You can come up with novel MEV mitigations. Incredibly sophisticated stuff. The reality is most builders are not ready or don't have needs or don't have a use case that's vetted out where you need that level of sophistication. And I think like one of the biggest questions that are going to sort of emerge, and I think with these adoption curves, is like, are things like the OP stack going to gain these sophisticated capabilities by the time developers need it, or is it you build your prototype and your first version on OP stack, and maybe you build your second or third version on the Cosmos SDK? I think all of these possibilities are out there, and the future is unknown.
Yeah, so to summarize, maybe it's like the scope of application and the level of flexibility that the application requires. It feels Cosmos has a lot more ability to meet those types of demands. But the question is kind of, are the things that are useful today in crypto, are things like OP Stack like good enough already for a lot of those things? And I think that definitely fits the mental model, I think, of a lot of just like builders in crypto and generally when they think about which ecosystems to go to. I know we only have 1 minute left, but just wanted to do like a quick hits like outro question. Yeah, let's say we're sitting here on the stage 1 year from now. Where's Multichain in a year? What do you hope to see?
Zaki?
I think we'll see. I think it's going to become, I think in general the trends are going to be ecosystems are going to look a lot more like each other, and end users. And if we get all of these things like, you know, USDC, CCP, bridging protocols like Axelar, it becomes more and more invisible that there are multiple chains. Like that should be the goal of every multi-chain builder, is to make the fact that there are many chains invisible. And that's the end-to-end execution.
100%. I think to onboard a billion users or even 1 million users, we need seamless user experience, right? And right now it's extremely cumbersome to use blockchains. And to have this seamless user experience, we need more and more people to integrate cross-chain. So my hope is we have more developers integrating cross-chain and more people using the technology next year.
And just adding to that, I think an elevated quality in the products, better products that have some stronger degree of product market fit and sustained meaningful traction. It's, the interoperability infrastructure, modular tooling, all of this is great. It's exciting, but it's a means to an end. We need to focus on real products that solve real problems for real people. And so, yeah, looking forward to that next year.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Zaki, Georgios, and Mike. And yeah, hopefully we can talk about this in a year's time and we're all right. So awesome. Thanks, guys.